There have been a lot of Star Wars games over the years. Like, a lot. A lot. RPGs, action-adventure, shooters, flight sims, kart racing. Yeah, that's the thing. Some of them were great, some less so, and some were just flat-out bad. Really bad. They've tried some new things, fallen back on tried and tested ideas, and every variation between. Sometimes it works, sometimes not, and sometimes sort of ish. Anyway, the point is, we've seen close to everything the setting can offer in terms of mechanical variety. So much so, in fact, one might be left wondering what's even the point in making more of them. If it's for the story, why not try a book, another film, comic, or what have you? Which is a valid point, but quite a weak one, with even a cursory consideration. Video games are an inherently more personal medium than just about anything, actually. More than real life, in fact, in a very tangible way, as disturbing as that may sound. Video games allow us to interact with every facet of the world around us, digitally speaking. Up to and including the way other people interact with us. It's kind of creepy, actually, when you really think about it. But it's hard to deny, but that's a conversation for another time, though. The easiest answer, when it comes to Star Wars, is one that all of you, every single one, should already be screaming at the screen. So say it with me now. Star Wars has lightsabers! And a really cool setting with a lot of potential for cool set pieces. But mostly the lightsabers, let's be honest. And over the years, there have been surprisingly few games that have really given us that power fantasy of swinging the cool glow stick that can cut through anything. Even when we get them, Cortosis is suddenly everywhere. Cortosis is a metal, by the way, in the Star Wars canon. That's it can't stop a lightsaber, but it's resistant to it. You know. Anyway, where was I? Cut through anything, even when we get them, and you'd struggle to cut through a stiff fart on a sleepy Tuesday afternoon, but, I mean, you don't want the game to be too easy. Do you?
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
So, what is it about the lightsaber that makes it such a cultural icon? For all intents and purposes, it's a longsword that glows. Or a staff, sometimes. Typically a sword, though. Typically a longsword. Short versions, too. Not even a particularly unusual sword, either. Apart from some ancillary media, the blade stays at a standard length with a slight curve at the tip. Though the latter part isn't actually seen much outside of the original films. And even there, it wasn't easy to notice unless you were looking, really closely. So, again, what makes it so cool? Well, it's a lightsaber. Duh. And you know what? That's a good enough answer. It's cool because it is. And that's okay. What isn't so cool is the above-mentioned propensity for games to gloss over the fact that it can cut through anything apart from another lightsaber blade. Even the previously mentioned Cortosis isn't supposed to be immune to a lightsaber blade, merely resistant, like I said. Like concrete with a bullet, for example. It'll go through, still pass right through, but it'll lose some of its kinetic energy, some of the stopping power along the way. So for a blade, I suppose it means you'll need to exert more force. Or force. To cleave it in twain. Which is a pretty big deal for something that is literally as heavy as light. Which isn't very heavy at all, in case you hadn't noticed. So along come Respawn Entertainment with a Dark Souls, because everything is Dark Souls, inspired Star Wars game focused on brutal, visceral lightsaber combat. In many ways, the perfect fit. Apart from the usual issue of, look, I've already done the cut through anything bit to death, so let's just get into the meat of this. By now, I'm sure you've heard how Fallen Order is the best Star Wars game in years. Maybe you're even one of those making the claim. But the best compared to what, exactly? Battlefront 2 and that shitty mobile game? Not a high bar to clear now, really, is it? Also, aside from the microtransaction clusterfuck, Battlefront 2 is actually a really solid game. The lightsaber combat isn't especially deep, but it has a great pick-up and play appeal across the board. It doesn't excuse EA's greed, of course, but that's a discussion for another time. Let me just go off script for a moment, because I wanted to mention this, but I couldn't figure out where to put it in, so I'm going to do it now. There's actually a lot more to the lightsaber combat in Battlefront 2 than people seem to realise. There's not just the swinging and balancing your stamina, there's also a parrying system, which is where if you wait for somebody to swing towards you, just as they hit you when you're blocking, you press the attack and you'll take no damage, but they will. It's not particularly deep, but it's more complexity than people seem to realise. It's a pretty freaking good game. I've put a lot of hours into it. Anyway, a more egregious claim, one that actually got under my skin, is that this is the best implementation of lightsaber combat across the board, Fallen Order that is, by a huge margin according to some, which I'm willing to give leeway on considering the general age of the most vocal video game playing demographic. I mean, I'm not a young man, but Star Wars has still been around for longer than I have. And with such a huge library of video games in the franchise, it's not hard to see how even some of the most dedicated fans could have missed out on some over the years. Especially considering how many have been PC titles. I mean, consoles do make up a very large part of gaming, and console players tend to be the most vocal, overtly. PC gamers, we tend to have our own little forums where we talk amongst ourselves. It's just a difference in the mindset of the two demographics. Nothing wrong with either of them. Anyway, I'm getting off track again. So, let's explore this. How exactly does lightsaber combat work in Fallen Order? Initially, you have a standard 3-swing combo, and a stab move if you change direction mid-combo. It's useful for dealing with an enemy standing behind you or to the side of you, if you remember it's a thing. I kept forgetting. Everything else is unlocked as you progress, either via finding upgrades during gameplay or by buying new skills. Mostly the latter. However, even in late game, honestly you'll probably still be relying on the same 3-hit combo, which is rather clumsy to be honest. Though I kind of like that, to be perfectly honest, but I'll come back to that later.
Though pleasing some people.
Cal is still very young, seemingly in his late teens, though he looks far older, but we'll get into that later. He was still a Padawan when Order 66 kicked in, and a young one at that, so it makes a lot of sense that he would be inexperienced and inelegant. It makes quite a nice change to be so low on the skill ladder, and it does go some way to help offset the lack of power trip one would typically expect from playing the Ultimate Space Wizard. It just gets repetitive and old really darn quickly. Now, it's not true to say that Cal never improves throughout his journey, and he does actually expand his offensive capabilities a fair bit along the way. It's the implementation where things start to fall apart. Every new skill that the player unlocks is effectively a one-shot heavy or ranged attack, and pretty much every single one of them requires using your finite supply of force energy, which, bafflingly, this even extends to the overhead slice. Yeah, that's right. It requires drawing on the power of the Force to swing your lightsaber downward from above your head. Because reasons. Even more bafflingly, once you acquire a second lightsaber, by grafting 2 of them together so you can split it apart into 2, it also drains Force energy to use them. It's sort of a whirling, lunging automatic combo that can be interrupted, mind you, and Cal puts his second saber away after he finishes. Why? The special attack for the dual blade saber makes sense being a force power, at least for the second part of it. You have 2 stages to it. Because he uses telekinesis to sort of whirl it around himself in an arc. But holding a lightsaber in each hand? What's that all about?
Oh.
Now let's compare that to the Force Unleashed, which I actually don't care for either, truth be told. But I can't deny it's a duology that features some pretty impressive lightsaber combat. A set of games that really does play into the power fantasy of being an unstoppable force of nature, for the most part. Unless you play on hard and suck, like I do. Right from the beginning, we already have a mixture of light and heavy attacks and delay combos, with a large list of others to unlock along the way. Now, Cal does unlock a delay combo as well, but it adds a stab. Yeah, you can stab a bitch. which, as previously mentioned, you can do anyway by just pointing in a different direction for a moment. Well, there's a more fleshed out delay combo for the double blade, but it's honestly a huge hassle to pull off. You're almost guaranteed to be interrupted, either by being hit or by a swing being blocked, before it actually triggers. And despite the claims, it doesn't do anything notable in terms of extra damage. It simply allows you to attack for longer without stopping, assuming, you know, you don't get stopped by something else. Further, the Force Unleashed includes a number of Force powers that can add things like lightning damage to your combos, a Force Shield to reduce incoming damage, new crystals for your lightsaber, or lightsabers in the sequel, that'll be where the gameplay's from, that actually affect gameplay. Meanwhile, Cal has a huge supply of admittedly very cool looking cosmetic upgrades that make it look different. Your saber looks different, which counts for less than a squirt of piss, because you'll barely even see the damn thing most of the time. Score 1 for Starkiller.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
Admittedly, Fallen Order's combat often feels far more weighty. Sparks fly, enemies have glowing scorch marks where your blade connected, enemies deflect your swings with powerful movements of their own, and during duels with other Force users, this really helps deliver a sense of being in a desperate, pitched battle with a nigh insurmountable behemoth of raw power. But when a scout trooper blocks your lightsaber with a stun baton? Okay, it's still just as cool visually, even if it doesn't make a whole bunch of sense, you know? Purge troopers are fine. I guess they're canonically supposed to have Cortosis armor and weapons anyway. And they are trained specifically to fight Jedi after all, so that one gets passed. Despite the minor annoyance of yet another game that ignores how the blade should work, it fits perfectly fine from a gameplay perspective. Starkiller also was unable to dispatch everything with a single graze, so on its own it doesn't amount to anything more than a minor irritation that one can overlook in the name of making a more balanced game. It would have been easy enough to work around this by throwing large numbers of opponents against you, each that could be taken down with a single strike though. But the slower, more deliberate style of play doesn't support such a system, which makes it fucking insulting when they start throwing hordes of enemies at you anyway. So just use the double blade, right? It's intended for just this purpose after all, but it's also slower, and does less damage somehow, and has less reach? Or certainly feels like it does anyway. Though deflecting an entire barrage of enemy fire in rapid succession is really bloody cool, not gonna lie, I love doing that. Also, you can make your lightsaber pink. Win!
If you ooze masculinity like some of us do, you have no reason to fear pink. Smashing!
Sadly, it's around 2/3 of the way into the game before you gain access to most of the saber colours. Though Respawn have at least since released a patch that carries over any cosmetic unlocks into a new game plus. Sadly, it doesn't include any of your skills or experience due to the heavily story-focused nature of the game. Disappointing, but not the worst thing to ever happen. Point, again, goes to the Force Unleashed though. Further similarities come in the shape of different enemy types. Both games feature special mobs that clearly have an intended strategy for dealing with them. However, Unleashed once again wins out because it makes this far more apparent. It also has a linear progression of powers unlocked to ensure you always have the right tools for the job, as well as a much wider roster to choose from overall. For all intents and purposes, Cal uses telekinesis, and that's pretty much the be-all and end-all. I suppose what I'm really saying here is that whilst the Unleashed series offers extra skills and abilities to increase complexity, with Fallen Order, your new powers are the complexity. It's just one thing after another, you know? But I'd like to bring this back around to something I touched on earlier, namely, Cal is very young, still merely a Padawan. And after the events of Order 66, he essentially cut himself off from the Force and forgot pretty much everything he already learned, making his journey more one of rediscovery. Not too dissimilar to the Force Unleashed 2, actually. From a narrative perspective, I really like that. It goes a long way to explaining why Cal's lightsaber technique is so limited and clumsy. His swings are wide and arcing, clearly focused more on raw strength than a graceful flow. And I do like that a hell of a lot. It's not something we usually see done with a Jedi character, or any kind of melee character for that matter. The problem is that he never really improves. Even later lightsaber techniques still come from the same place. It would have been great to see him start out callow, uncertain and clumsy, but slowly improve as time goes by, becoming more graceful, learning new techniques for his melee combat as well as greater attunement or reattunement to his force powers. But we don't get that. The same awkward power over finesse trio of swings is the same throughout the entire game, and it gets really old. The few flares of flavour, like a special attack if you switch between single and double bladed or vice versa by holding the attack button, just don't do enough to mix things up. This is where we need to talk about Dark Souls for a moment, because it's no secret that Respawn wanted to make a Star Wars version of it. Grueling difficulty, openish world, but linear progression, and ambush enemies. But they didn't commit to it, not fully, and only really took the most surface level understanding of what makes those games work. We have multiple difficulty settings, and they have absolutely zero impact over the way you progress anyway. A person playing on Jedi Grandmaster will have, narratively, the exact same experience as the one playing on story mode.
All this happy horse shit.
Don't get me wrong, accessibility is great, and Fallen Order really excels at it, but it gives us absolutely no reason to play anything other than easy mode, unless, like me, you're a fucking masochist and just hate yourself. It's an oil and water approach. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too, and that's fine, I guess. Make the game you want to make, but I don't think they really did. There's a clear disconnect between what was supposed to be the finished product and what we finally got. Anyway, Dark Souls. Let it be known, I haven't actually played any of the Soulsborne games, so I'm not an expert on them by any stretch of the imagination. Also no footage. But I do know enough to see what they were going for. The thing that really sets Soulsborne apart is the level of complexity in its progression, though. There are multiple weapons, each with their own quirks, strengths, and weaknesses. Even two that seem identical will have nuances between them, slightly faster swing speed, slightly different combo, that kind of thing. Furthermore, when Soulsbornes employ ambush enemies, they do it sparingly, in quieter moments when you're starting to become complacent, as a way of mixing things up a little and keeping you on your toes. Fallen Order has entire areas built around the idea. It just makes your first time through a series of frustrating deaths out of nowhere, and repeat experiences lose any sense of tension because you know what to expect. You just walk around the corner with your saber up. They're also very poorly telegraphed, so you really will just be ganked out of nowhere the first time around. It's unbalanced. To be honest, and not just because of what I've already said, it doesn't feel like a Soulsborne at all. Not really. It's a lot closer to a more recent game, Sekiro specifically, which also isn't a Soulsborne despite what some people like to think and still insist. It has similarities, but there are a few key elements that distinguish it one from the other. It's a natural progression of the style, certainly, but Sekiro just works in a way that Fallen Order doesn't, because the team behind it have far more experience in this type of game. It's worth pointing out, I don't think Respawn were actually influenced by Sekiro. The two games were released too close together for that. I think it's far more likely that each studio just had similar ideas independently, with one being able to bring prior experience to the table to make something that works better than the other one. No points forgetting which is which. I spent a bit of time with Sekiro while writing this actually, and as you can see, despite having not picked it up for a while, I was able to get by far easier. Admittedly, I was also using a trainer on this save file, putting my attack power up to 50 so that enemies die faster, but the general flow of the game just works better. Tougher enemies, the boss fights, forcing you to employ everything you learned before, with a massive focus on parrying over dodging. Both games do this, and whilst it's true that on lower difficulties paratiming is far more forgiving in Fallen Order, it's also true that Jedi Grandmaster is the intended difficulty. which demands you be super precise whilst also having a degree of delay between pressing the button before your weapon is actually in place to block an incoming attack. It also has a number of powerful moves that cannot be blocked, that also have inconsistent wind-up animations and often home in towards you even if you do dodge. Compare that to Sekiro, which allows you to just spam the block button, with fairly liberal chances of success. You'll at least block if you don't parry. Meanwhile, the moment you see that very clear symbol above an enemy's head, you can effect your Mikiri counter with nigh absolute certainty it'll be successful. Or simply dodge quite easily out of the way, consistently. It all comes down to your reaction time rather than apparent RNG based on how generous the game is feeling at that moment. It's also quite forgiving in Sekiro. You have time to actually dodge, and if you do dodge, you dodge. Fallen Order doesn't do that. Number of times I've dodged and they haven't even finished their wind-up. I'm like, what's the point in the flash on screen? I'm going off script again, but what is the point of the flash on screen? That's supposed to be saying, dodge now, not wait for it and dodge afterwards. I don't know why they made that decision, and who the fuck thought it was a good idea to have the enemy that kills you glow gold so that you can't even see the red thing. Okay, there's a sound stinger as well, but okay, Sekiro. It even goes one step further by having some different special moves that are countered in a different way, such as throwing lightning back at Genichiro. I have no footage of that. I do have footage of the fight, but not of me throwing lightning back at him. Meaning even the parrying and countering system has some added complexity to it. Fallen Order just has parrying and mostly being hit by an attack that you can even see landing several feet away. Yeah, that happens too. Even on lower difficulties, that's the worst part. It's also inconsistent. It smacks of a game that was pushed out the door too early. The multitude of clipping issues on Dathomir, was that even play tested? Like, at all? Seriously? And why does it look so much like Korriban? I've been thinking about this actually whilst I was playing it again recently. I have a hunch that it was originally supposed to be Korriban, but they wanted to include Night Sisters as part of the story, and the time that should have gone into finishing the Dathomir section was instead put into swapping in new character models and combat animations, you know, rather than actually finishing off the map. Hey, at least it gave us Merrin, who damn sure better be in the next game.
I can help.
What are you thinking?
A ritual. It will hide the ship, I hope.
A ritual?
She has a knack for this kind of stuff.
Wait a minute. Now, hold on. Now, what is this going to require?
A sacrifice. One of your arms will do nicely.
Wait, what?
Don't be so serious. Join me up front.
My wife.
Look, I don't hate the game. I own and have played through it 3 times. Twice on Grandmaster. And the second time through, on Grandmaster, I did start to get to grips with the systems enough to offset some of my complaints. But only some. The combat system was clearly built to be slow, deliberate, and emphasise one-on-one dueling, and for that it mostly works. But there are a multitude of occasions when it throws you into a huge group of plebs that will just pin you in a corner and wail on you. Like the moment shortly after rebuilding your lightsaber. You come upon a group of fodder and it's supposed to be your cut-loose power trip, but it just isn't. But that's a problem The Force Unleashed has too, and Sekiro, but Sekiro's not intending for you to do that. But yeah, it's a problem The Force Unleashed does have. So, you know, all those points I was giving it before, well, truth be told, Fallen Order and The Force Unleashed, they're both about the same at the end of the day. Neither one really stands out as being a truly great game. They have their moments, but they have their flaws, some of them overlapping. So, play it for the story, right? That's the real focus here, which is true. But all I consider to that is, what story? There's a lot of character development, and quite an interesting backstory for those characters. They also intertwine for the most part. But because of the characters used, and the time frame it takes place in, nothing ever comes of it. Also, why are there TIE interceptors there? They're not supposed to exist until like 20 years later. Spoilers for those who care. You go on a galaxy-wide search for a holocron containing a list of Force-sensitive children so you can find them and train them to be Jedi, thus rebuilding the Jedi Order. Along the way, the Empire finds out and tries to get it first, but they only find out because of you going looking for it, and when they ultimately beat you to it, and you inevitably get it back, you just destroy it, making the whole thing completely pointless. Again, it's like they didn't fully commit to what they wanted to do. Perhaps for fear of messing with established canon? Which one? Which just leaves me wondering, why even set it during this time period? Also, it's a fucking big galaxy out there. And whilst it is true that we probably would have heard about a new Jedi Order being trained, well, would we?
Sorry.
Would we really? The destruction of the holocron was just the fecal icing on the shit cake, to be honest. Why not instead say that Cal did keep the holocron and handed it off to Luke a few decades later, because Luke did go on to train some new Force-sensitive Jedi between Jedi and The Force Awakens, you know, along with Kylo. Why wasn't it them? Cal showed him where they were. Oh hell, just do what the Mandalorian did. But you didn't see that one coming, eh? Like I said, big galaxy. Let me ask you this. Do you know who the Gurkhas are?
Well, Captain,
some of you will, I'm sure, but not everyone. Very few, in fact, I'd wager. What
What
about Taoism? The Knights Templar? The Japanese SAF and why they exist? All of these things are well known to some, but complete mysteries to others. And that's just on one planet. Imagine that spread across an entire galaxy. The Jedi may well have been a galactically renowned force of mediators and peacekeepers, but there were also very, very few of them. And they focused most of their attention on the inner core worlds. Out in the sticks, people had far more immediate local concerns, like a rice farmer in Thailand, for example. They don't have time to worry about what Joe Bumfuck in Germany is doing for world peace. Whatever. They have rice to protect from aphids, or they starve and die. More spoilers for The Mandalorian this time, just in case you didn't know. Din Djarin, the title character, is a Mandalorian, no dirt. A quasi-religious militia that trained specifically to hunt Jedi at one time, and he'd never heard of them. Sure, he's still quite new to it all, and young, and it does take place sometime after the Jedi Purge, I'm pretty sure. The fact the Empire's around kind of gives it away. But his home was attacked and almost wiped out by separatist battle droids. It's not entirely clear when this actually happened, exactly. But we do know that those units, those types of droids, were effectively history by the time of A New Hope. And the Empire is still very much a real thing during the events of the show. So he should be old enough to at least have lived through the time of the Jedi Purge, if nothing else. But he knows nothing, absolutely nothing, about his supposed greatest rivals. Even the Mandalorian that tells him only knows them through old, almost mythical stories. Anyway, let's get back on track here. The point I'm trying to make is that Fallen Order is not the powerhouse Jedi power fantasy that it's been made out to be. Fundamental flaws and an utterly pointless story just leave it being a good game. Nothing special, just good. And one I even enjoy playing much of the time. It just has things that drag it down and spoil what it was trying to do. Same for The Force Unleashed, but...
There is another.
What if I told you you're all looking in the wrong place? This goes back to a seemingly throwaway comment I made right back near the beginning. There are a lot of Star Wars games, and a lot of them didn't make it to the mass market, or at least into the public consciousness, because they were made for the PC. I'd like to take everyone back 15 years to the Jedi Knight series. Jedi Academy specifically. Though its predecessor Jedi Outcast did see a console release early on, and both are now available on the latest consoles, featuring not one, or two, or even three, but 5 distinct lightsaber styles. Outcast only has 3, so I'm going to focus on Academy. Jedi Academy is the definitive Jedi experience, at least to date. See for yourself. Lightsaber blades have the heft that you would expect, with even minor bosses possible, though unlikely, to be dispatched in a single hit. Multiple powers with 3 levels to each, and you get to decide which ones you level up for the most part. You have some core abilities that level up at set points in the story, but for the rest you get a point per level, 15 maximum. And not enough to max them all out, allowing you a lot of flexibility over how you build your character, while still ensuring the essential skills are always there when you need them, plus giving replay value to try out different powers. All of that is pretty standard though, you might be thinking. That's true. So what is it that makes the game so darn good? Because it legitimately is the space wizard with laser sword power fantasy we always wanted, and it's already here, it's been here for quite a while. Well, that's where the lightsaber part comes into play. Because pretty much every game gets the force powers down pat, let's be honest. But melee combat, that's another story. So what makes Jedi Academy's combat so damn good? Well, it's not just that there are 5 styles to choose from. It's not even that there's a hell of a lot of actual difference between them. Oh no. It's in how you use them that things get really interesting. See, Jedi Academy doesn't have combos. Not a single one. Like, at all. No combos. Seriously. But it does have a system that allows you to string attacks together. Bear with me. Pretty much indefinitely. You don't even have to let go of the attack button. Though you probably should, because you won't be able to block otherwise. Each style has a standard attack that you'll pretty much always start with just by pressing the attack button, but after that it's all about directional inputs. If you move to the left, your Jedi, Jaden, will make an attack in a leftward direction, right for the right and so on. Pulling off different moves based on where your saber is at that time, so if you go left, then go left again, it'll do another left attack, but it won't, it'll take longer. You get what I mean, I hope. Though the animations aren't infinite, of course, there are only a few of them, it does let you flow with your weapon, really emphasising the idea that a lightsaber is just an extension of the user rather than a tool clumsily stapled on the end.
Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
Depending on your current saber style, wading into a room chock full of dudes makes you feel like an unstoppable whirling dervish or a methodical, cold-blooded Terminator. It all depends on how you want to play. Some styles are fast, some are slow and decimate even the most powerful foes, and all of them are absolutely lethal, with actual damage output being only moderately affected by the specific fighting style chosen. See, let's all say it again. A lightsaber can cut through anything. So it shouldn't, and pretty much doesn't, matter how hard or fast you swing. If the blade makes contact, it starts fucking bitches up. The only proviso is that longer, more direct contact does more damage than a quick swipe across the shoulder, something like that. So the strong style with its arcing overhead slice is more likely to kill something in one strike because it cuts straight down the middle, while the fast style will quickly poke and slash, if you follow my meaning. But blocking is where things start to get really interesting. Oh yeah, it gets better. See, similar to some fighting games, you don't have a dedicated block button. If you're not using your saber, or a force power, or jumping, you'll block automatically. Most of the time. Some of the time. Depends on what's going on and where you're being attacked from. Also depends on the level of your lightsaber skill, so that depends on pros. But anyway, stabbed in the back, you're pretty much goosed. Coming from the side, depends exactly where, how fast, and the rank of your lightsaber skill as previously mentioned. But even imperfect blocks still tend to reduce the hit, giving you a chance to back away and try a different attack. You can even deflect, to an extent, attacks whilst attacking. If the blade comes down onto your blade, it still counts, it still makes contact. The one thing that doesn't prevent blocking is movement, though. In fact, again, this actually helps in most cases. If a Sith acolyte is barreling towards you, back away a little and he'll bounce off, because you'll be blocking, leaving you open for a quick blow of your own. Step to the side and turn to face him to shiv him up from behind, that kind of thing. There are even the dramatic locked sabers moments when you both attack at the same time. Pretty rare they happen. Freaking awesome. So then, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It is not. Not even close. to being
They're
the
the
perfect
cells.
Jedi simulator.
How do I
It's the prettiest, and often the most visceral from a purely visual perspective, which does greatly add to the sense of immersion. But it's a veneer that hides a shockingly shallow button masher. If you've only experienced this and The Force Unleashed and haven't played that for a while, then I can absolutely see how you think so highly of it. And it's not a terrible game, it's pretty bloody good. Good enough that, like I said, I bought it 3 times. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm older than your typical gamer. Maybe it's because I've been far more PC focused for almost 2 decades. Maybe it's just because I'm a grumpy git that's never happy with anything, blinded by nostalgia. But I played through the whole of Jedi Academy just recently, and it's better than I remember. It really is. Not only does it hold up, it exceeded my expectations. It was better than I remember. It really was. I know, I'm going to say it one more time, just for emphasis. It's better than I remember. If you're turned off by dated visuals, well, that's your prerogative. I'm not going to judge. But still, I recommend giving it a try. It's a great game. This took a hell of a lot longer to make than I expected. This was the first script I started working on, and I stopped to do Remake 3, thinking that I'd be fast. And it was fairly. But then I got sidetracked by Spider-Man, and now I'm back to this, and... yeah, again, didn't help that I've been ill recently. But in the end, I found myself being far less critical of Fallen Order than I originally expected, despite slogging my way through it again for footage and to keep my impressions fresh in my mind. Truth be told, I freaking hate the game. It was worse than I remember because it's been about a year since I last played it. But I don't know, I still keep going back. So I must have done something right. Anyway, do all the usual in the gubbins down below. Throw some money my way on Patreon if you'd like to hear more. Tell me I'm a moron if you think I'm a moron, you know, whatever you want. If you do like what I'm doing here and want to support me on Patreon, it'd be very much appreciated. I'd like to say it'll make me put these out more consistently. Yeah. Anyway, that's it for this one. Sort of stumbled a bit at the end here, but I think I've said everything I needed to say. Next time, I'm already working on my next one. That's going to be something that's very personal. Still video game related though. But that's all I'm prepared to say right now. Play Jedi Academy. It's amazing. And they're on the modern consoles. Don't cost too much. Thank you for watching.
I was only a child when they attacked. An armored warrior brandishing this descended upon us and cut down my people, my sisters, until I was left alone with the dead.